The Jewish Year in Review.
The year 5753 was chock full of exciting changes and developments, new personalities coming to the forefront, and some beloved veterans departing the scene.
5753 saw its share of major crises besetting Israel and world Jewry. I'm Shelley Kaminer.
And I'm Nicole Adler. Join us as we take a look at the Jewish year that was. The year's biggest story is Israel's de facto recognition of Yasser Arafat's PLO and their deal for Palestinian autonomy in Gaza and Jericho first. Ehud Olmert was Minister of Health in the last Likud government. Mr. Olmert, what are your feelings on the PLO, and what about negotiating with the PLO?
Well, I'm definitely very unhappy about this latest development. I always say that the question is not who are you talking with, but what are you talking about. In a certain way, one can't say that Arafat is the only Arab murderer that we are dealing with. Actually, all of them are more or less the same. Assad, even the late President Sadat was. But the difference is that we know in advance that the ultimate objective of Arafat is one that we will never be able to agree to. And even on these days, the government says that we will never agree to. But unfortunately, by recognizing the PLO and talking with the PLO, I think tacitly at this point and explicitly at a further stage, we will have to agree with the idea of a Palestinian state, which all of us, including the Labour Party leaders until now, said will create a mortal danger to the very existence of Israel. So what's the use of talking to someone with whom you either can't agree or if you agree with, it then creates such a danger to the existence of Israel that it shouldn't have been done in the first place.
Okay, on Jerusalem, why do you think the city needs you as a mayor, and do you think you can win?
Well, I am definitely going to win. The only reason I run is because I believe I can win. I'm not just sacrificing myself for the sake of running. I'm running because I'm sure, I'm confident I have a widespread support in this city. I think many Jerusalemites want a change at this point. They respect Teddy Kollek for his achievements as a mayor in the last 28 years. But the idea that an 83-year-old man will run for another term of 5 years is outrageous to many, and therefore they will at this time change their vote and vote for a younger man. But I think there is another dimension which is related to the first question, and this is the future of Jerusalem, the status of Jerusalem. And I believe that the big battle about the future of Jerusalem is still awaiting us. And this will be a very crucial battle. The Palestinians, and particularly the PLO, will insist, as they say today, that they would like to have Jerusalem as the capital city of a future Palestinian state. And we will have to defend it. And I want to believe that I have the power and the experience and the international connections to be able to be the voice of Jerusalem in this big battle.
Some say the Likud is dead. What do you say?
The Likud is alive and kicking, and I believe that the Likud will take over soon. It will take some time, of course. Unfortunately, we lost the last elections. It takes time to recuperate. And just as no one says that the Republican Party is dead in America, I think the announcement about the death of Likud were premature in the state of Israel. We have now a new leader, a very strong personality, a very popular person in the state of Israel, and I believe worldwide, Benjamin Netanyahu. And under his leadership, we are going to fight back strongly. I believe we have a very good cause. Most of the Israelis did not abandon their basic attitudes that side with the Likud opinions about the future of Eretz Israel. And if the elections will take place sooner than we think, then I believe that the Likud will win the next elections and that we will be back in power to lead the people of Israel and the Jewish nation.
Okay, Mr. Olmert, thank you for joining us, and good luck in your upcoming election.
Thank you very much.
5753 saw changes of the guard at the White House, Canada's Prime Minister, Israel's presidency, and the chairmanship of the Likud party. Last November, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton defeated incumbent President George Bush in a three-way race for the White House. American Jewry was very disenchanted with Mr. Bush for his overt Israeli bashing, pressure and withholding of loan guarantees. In Canada, Brian Mulroney stepped aside as Prime Minister and his party replaced him with Kim Campbell, who will probably call elections in November.
Chaim Herzog ended 10 years as Israel's president, handing over the reins to one-time Likud defense minister, former Air Force chief and born-again Leberite, Ezer Weitzman, nephew of Israel's first president, Chaim Weitzman. Where was the new president's first public appearance? At Likud's National Convention on the Golan Heights.
Israel's economy continued to surge ahead this year, with the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange doubling in value and domestic growth approaching 7%, one of the highest growth rates in the Western world, higher than Europe, North America and the Far East. In the wake of its defeat to Labour, the Likud party resurrected itself in a nationwide primary election for a new chairman who will be the party's standard bearer for prime minister in the next elections. Over 250,000 Israelis joined the party and voted in the election, 100,000 more than voted in Labour's primary some months earlier.
To no one's surprise, the winner was the charismatic Benjamin Netanyahu, who handily defeated challengers Benjamin Begin and David Levy. Netanyahu has been leading a fighting opposition in the Knesset and has been vigorously promoting his points of view, as he did recently on The Larry King Show, where he was talking about his new book, A Place Among the Nations. Netanyahu addressed the issue of land for peace with Mr. King.
Israel today, this greater Israel that you hear about, this Israel with the territories that the Arabs speak about, is all of 40 miles wide today with the territories. Without the territories, it would be 10 miles wide. And that has two implications. One is, obviously, the Jewish people have dreamed for centuries, in fact for millennia, of coming back to this land. But equally, now that they're here, it'll be very hard, I think, to have Israel survive in a tiny coastal strip 10 miles wide. I think if you imagine where you're sitting right now in Washington, if you imagine the United States shrunk to 10 miles and Yasser Arafat sitting on the other side or on this side of the Potomac, you can understand the trepidations that most Israelis have about the idea of a Palestinian state right at the outskirts of Tel Aviv.
Part of the Likud agenda has been to block Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Foreign Minister Shimon Peres from giving back the Golan Heights to Syria's Hafez Assad. A grassroots movement of Golan residents has formed to fight a withdrawal calling for Shalom im HaGolan, peace with the Golan. One of their leaders, Chaim Sapiria, was in the U.S. recently and has this to say on the subject.
Hafez al-Assad is an old, stable president of Syria. Well, he was never elected, but he's a president. He's old enough for me to say that there's a possibility that even if he really wants peace and if he changed his mind, his strategy totally, he might die either because of his age, or he might be assassinated by someone shortly after he signs a peace agreement with Israel, which I don't believe he will. Or there's also a possibility that his government will be taken over. This is enough for us to be scared of this situation.
Syria is a brutal dictatorship in the Iraqi mold. They've been spending billions of dollars given them by the supposedly moderate Saudi Arabians, arming them to the teeth with tanks, planes, and the latest North Korean Scud missiles. U.S. Defense Secretary Les Aspin had this to say to a recent AIPAC conference on Israel's challenges due to the area arms race.
So to sum up, we still have to be vigilant about Israel's old world security threats, but basically they're in hand. However, at the same time, Israel faces now new threats. From one end of the spectrum, Israel faces the threat of ballistic missiles coupled with chemical, biological, or even nuclear warheads. From the other end of the spectrum, Israel faces the danger of direct and sudden violence to individual citizens. As one observer put it, today Israel faces the knife and the missile, but it can handle the things in between.
Israeli public opinion polls favor retaining the Golan Heights and indicate distrust of Assad.
Foreign Minister Peres has been courting and trying to whitewash Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, this against the wishes of the U.S. State Department. The Rabin government has put a freeze on Jewish construction in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, openly discriminating against Jews by transferring millions of budget dollars instead to help Arab businesses, housing, and infrastructure in the territories. They even sealed off the territories this past winter and de facto re-established the 1967 boundaries.
Most alarming to many Israelis and friends of Israel has been the Rabin Perez opening of dialogue and negotiations with the PLO, bringing them into the peace process in stark contrast to 30 years of Israeli policy and in violation of campaign promises. Likud chairman Netanyahu had this to say on the issue of the PLO.
PLO, notwithstanding Yasser Arafat's pronouncements, really is like a Trojan horse that wants to be parked inside Israel's defensive wall, and then once having established a PLO state right on the West Bank, to make their drive towards the sea, as they say quite openly in Arabic, maybe not on CNN.
Here to discuss these issues is Mr. Robert Weintraub, Vice President of Likud USA. Mr. Weintraub, what about Labour's Land for Peace program? What does this actually mean to Israel's security and to the Jewish people?
Well, what it means, firstly, is that Israel will have no natural defenses on its eastern frontier. It's hard to see what kind of arrangements can be made to guarantee Israel's security. Having American troops there, I think, is a very poor idea, because that would make Israel almost entirely dependent on the United States for its security. And as we saw with Bosnia and Yugoslavia, big powers are not always reliable supporters in times of crisis.
Do you see any difference between the PLO, Hamas, and Hezbollah? And do you think a peace agreement can really be made with them?
As far as Israel is concerned, by their own statements, the PLO and Hamas agree that Israel is to be pressured by continuous assault and killing of Jews, and this is happening on the West Bank and in the so-called security area north of Israel. The Arabs have adopted this policy of negotiate and kill. This is to soften up Israel for concessions. Thus far, the Arabs haven't made any concessions. It's Israel that has made all the concessions.
Terrorism has risen dramatically in the past year. Israel bombarded Iranian-backed Hezbollah. And what do you feel is being done to deal with this problem? Is there enough being done at the present time?
Well, the strategy that the Arabs have used, as I say, is to kill Jews in order to get Israel to soften its policies. It seems to be working. The way to defeat terrorism is to inflict more punishment on the terrorists than they inflict on you.
Radical Islamic fundamentalism, its message of violence and non-compromise, is spreading throughout the Middle East and here to the U.S. with February's World Trade Center bombing. 15 Islamic militants, headed by Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, were indicted in August on federal seditious conspiracy charges for planning to bomb the UN, the Lincoln and Holland tunnels, the local FBI office, and military installations. The indictment also reopens the Meir Kahane murder case, charging his assassin El Sayed Nosair with a federal offense of committing a murder to aid a larger conspiracy. Nosair was acquitted last year on state murder charges, but is serving 8 years on weapons possession and SALT charges. The fundamentalists are of concern to Israel, and the U.S. Defense Secretary Aspen had this to say.
Radicalism, both secular and religious, has gained momentum over the last decade. It continues to pose a special threat to regional stability and to the peace process, and thus to Israel's security. Fundamentalists have grown in strength in Algeria, Sudan, Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, and Tunisia, and among the Palestinians. Islamic extremists, in particular, are linked to state-sponsored terrorism and are infringing on the basic human rights of moderate, nonviolent Islamic fundamentalist groups who want to work within the system.
To quell the Hamas fundamentalist terrorism against Israelis, Prime Minister Rabin deported 400 Hamas leaders to Lebanon in one fell swoop this winter. Benjamin Netanyahu addressed this issue on CNN.
Well, I'm sure I would have done it differently. I'm not sure I would have put them all in one clump opposite Israel's border in Lebanon. I probably would have done it differently so it doesn't become a media circus, which it's become. But you have to understand that you're not talking about a clutch of Mother Teresa's there. You know, these are not fine people who are just humanitarian, humanitarian activists. These are people who themselves have blood on their hands, who incite the murder of Jews and Arabs daily.
Surprising and pleasing just about everyone, President Clinton nominated Brooklyn Board Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg to the U.S. Supreme Court. Ginsburg is the first Jew to sit on the court since Abe Fortas resigned in 1969. She was confirmed 96-3 in the Senate, evincing strong bipartisan support. On the subject of justice, Israel's Supreme Court acquitted John Demjanjuk on trial for 6 years, accused of being the notorious Ivan the Terrible, the guard who ran the gas chambers at Treblinka. More serious, perhaps, than the ultimate fate of Demjanjuk is the release by the German government in May of Kurt Franz from prison. Franz was the deputy commander of Treblinka, where Germans killed 900,000 Jews. Franz has been sentenced to life in prison for complicity in the murder of at least 300,000 Jews. With us to discuss these issues is Nechama Tec, professor, scholar, and author of the recently published book Defiance, the story of the Jewish Bielski partisans during World War II, published by Oxford University Press. Ms. Tec is a Holocaust survivor herself. Ms. Tec, what do you feel about the Demjanjuk acquittal, and what do you think should be his ultimate fate?
I think he should be tried, but he should be tried in the Ukraine, where he really belongs. If it were up to me, that's where I would send him. I'm sure that he is guilty of crimes, and he should be sentenced and tried, but not in Israel. I think we've wasted enough time and we spend enough energy, and it's enough. I would send him to the Ukraine if possible. I don't know if it is legally possible, of course, but that's what I would do. But I agree with you fully that Kurt Franz, he was first a deputy, but later he was the commandant of Treblinka, that he is guilty of many more crimes, many more crimes than the Demjanjuk or the Ivan the Terrible, and yet you see he was let go. This is very surprising and very frustrating, really.
So what do you say about his parole? Do you think that it's unjustified? And what do you think it would send out to the world, a message about the relevance of the Holocaust today?
Well, I don't think it would change the relevance, but it would sort of, it simply tells us that the Germans are not confronting the Holocaust, and that they are not dealing with it really openly, at least not the judicial system and so forth, the courts. I'm sure that there are people in Germany that are appalled by the sentence as well. So something has to be done about it, but I don't think there was too much opposition to this verdict and so forth. So I am both frustrated, disappointed, and surprised.
I look forward to reading your book, Defiance. Thank you for joining us today, Ms. Tec.
Thank you.
Crown Heights. No other two words generate as much passion and emotion among New York Jews. In 1991, 29-year-old Yankel Rosenbaum was murdered by a rampaging mob. This occurred 3 hours into a full-scale riot that ignited into the wake of the accidental killing of a 7-year-old black child, Gavin Cato, by a driver in the Lubavitcher Rebbe's motorcade. 3 days of unbridled rioting ensued. Here's what former Mayor Ed Koch had to say about it.
We saw the first pogrom that I'm aware of since the last pogrom, which took place in Poland after World War II.
Rosenbaum's accused murderer, Lemrick Nelson, identified by Rosenbaum himself at the scene, was acquitted for all charges. The state's Gurgenti report this July came down hard on New York's Mayor, David Dinkins, for negligence, incompetence, and detached management. Mr. Dinkins, meanwhile, went to Israel this summer to mend fences and declare never again. But his Republican liberal challenger, Rudolph Giuliani, has been bashing the mayor on this issue, along with many others. In June, a new group, the Jewish Action Alliance, sponsored a major rally outside City Hall that attracted many New York leaders. With us is Beth Gilinskey, Executive Director of the organization. Ms. Gilinskey, what does Crown Heights mean to the American Jews?
Well, Shelley, Crown Heights was a turning point in American Jewish history. Never before was there a pogrom against the Jewish community on American soil where men, women, and children were terrorized for days on end with no police protection. And more than that, it was a turning point because there's now a revolution in Jewish leadership going on. Jewish established leadership failed miserably during Crown Heights, and every Jew in America knows it. And people are asking now very tough questions about what our leadership did, what they should have done, and what they should be doing, not only on this issue, but on all issues of concern to the Jewish community.
Interesting. Well, how do you feel that the Crown Heights issue will affect traditional Jewish support for a Democratic mayor facing election this coming November?
It's very interesting. In Los Angeles, after the Los Angeles riots, a Republican mayor, Reardon, was elected, and the Jewish community was the swing vote in Los Angeles, and it's usually a Democratic voting community.
Right.
The same thing may happen here in New York. You've got Rudy Giuliani running against Mayor David Dinkins. Giuliani is a Republican. The Jewish community generally votes Democratic, but this year, with the Crown Heights issue, with the dismal failures of the Dinkins administration in responding adequately, in preparing a proper investigation into Crown Heights, I think you're going to see that the Jewish swing vote is going to make an enormous difference, and we may see a Republican mayor this time in New York.
There are those who say the Holocaust never happened. There are those who ask, why are Jews so obsessed with security issues? There are those who say it's time to forget. A stirring rebuttal to revisionism, ignorance, and bigotry has opened this April on the Mall in Washington, D.C. It's called the United States Holocaust Museum. Its opening was an event of major significance. Let's take a look at some of the opening ceremonies, the dignitaries who attended, and the museum itself.
For the dead and the living, we must bear witness. For not only are we responsible for the memories of the dead, we are also responsible for what we are doing with those memories. Now, a museum is a place, I believe, that should bring people together.
On this 50th anniversary of the Warsaw Uprising, at Eisenhower Plaza on Raoul Wallenberg Place, we dedicate the United States Holocaust Museum and so bind one of the darkest lessons in history to the hopeful soul of America. As we have seen already today, this museum is not for the dead alone, nor even for the survivors who have been so beautifully represented. It is perhaps most of all for those of us who were not there at all, to learn the lessons, to deepen our memories and our humanity, and to transmit these lessons from generation to generation. The Holocaust, to be sure, transformed the entire 20th century, sweeping aside the Enlightenment hope that evil somehow could be permanently vanished from the face of the earth, demonstrating there is no war to end all war, that the struggle against the basest tendencies of our nature must continue forever and ever. The Holocaust began when the most civilized country of its day unleashed unprecedented acts of cruelty and hatred, abetted by perversions of science, philosophy, and law.
Jews are a people deeply steeped in its past, in its heritage, in its culture. For Jews, yesterday is today and tomorrow, as Jewish people constantly relive and recreate things past for the present. The Jewish Museum, one of the crown jewels of Jewish culture and heritage, reopened in June after a 2.5-year expansion hiatus. The expansion doubles the museum's gallery space and allots more space for educational programs, especially aimed at children. The Manhattan-based museum has a 27,000-piece collection encompassing works of art, antiquities, ceremonial objects, and more. Among the treasures on display is this Torah crown from Lvov from 1764 to 1773, a menorah from Frankfurt, Germany from around 1706, glorious works of art such as Oppenheim's 1833 Return of the Jewish Volunteer, Max Weber's The Talmudists from 1934, Elie Nedelman's The Dancer from 1918, Marc Chagall's 1914 Man in the Village, Bellboy by Chaim Soutine, 1928, and finally Andy Warhol's famous 1980 rendering of Chico, Groucho, and Harpo, the Marx Brothers. So much happens every year in Jewish life that it's hard to squeeze it all into a short program.
Jewish life encompasses so much triumph and tragedy, people and politics, danger and hope.
Through it all, we managed to fill in yet another page in the book of Jewish history for the year 5753.
We'd like to thank the Likud USA and the Harit Likud of Canada for making this program possible. If you'd like a copy of the show, addresses and telephone numbers will follow shortly.
I'm Nicole Adler-Dicker.
And I'm Shelley Kaminer, wishing you and yours a happy, healthy and prosperous new year of 5754.
הבית שלי, הדרך שלי, הליכוד זה נכון. העתיד שלי, הביטחון שלי, הליכוד זה נכון. בדרך שלנו נביא השלום, בנייה עלייה, הגשמת החלום. כולנו היחד, כל אחד לחוד, יודעים שזה נכון, זה הליכוד. הליכוד הוא בלב, הליכוד הוא בראש, הליכוד זה נכון. רק אחד יכול